I'm Crosse. I work at La Crosse Public Library, and I am Director at Large for Public Libraries for SSCS. And I would like to introduce local author, actor, videographer, Sean McDevitt.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, and it is an honor to be here today for the Wisconsin Library Association Conference. I'm really very pleased to be here. I'll give you a little background here on what it is that I do so far as being a self-published author. There is a backstory to it. First, I will tell you that the world of self-publishing is a vicious, bloody fistfight at a street level. And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. However, that being said, it can be very rewarding. Now, the way I fell into it was in sort of a roundabout way. I've always considered myself a bit of a writer. As a youth, I showed an ability and interest in writing. And luckily, I had teachers along the way who were very encouraging. And there was one in particular that I remember, Bill Debbie, who was my 6th grade teacher. We had to do a creative writing exercise once. And in the margins, I'll never forget this, he wrote in red pen in the margins of some silly story that I'd written. He had written, "Sean, you are simply too good at this. Don't give up." And I never did. I continued to write for years. To this day, I still have spiral notebooks filled that I wrote by hand in pencil, filled with science fiction, that sort of thing. Wrote 2 screenplays that never saw the light of day, but I wrote them. I even wrote a stage musical. Never hit the stage, but I wrote a stage musical. So I have all this material under my belt for years and years, but really nowhere to put it. And as often happens, life happens, and things went in a different way. I got into acting, I got into radio, I did several different things. Until about 5 years ago, I reconnect with an old friend of mine on Facebook. Now she is, without getting too far ahead, she is an author. She is an American who now lives in London. She goes under the name of Faith Pym, P-Y-M. She's just published a new book, a really wonderful book about Neanderthals. It's called Season of the Sand Bird. I strongly recommend it. It's a very wonderful, thoroughly researched book. Well, we were connected on Facebook about 5 years ago, and we were getting caught up on each other's lives. And I should probably give some backstory here. As long as I've known her, she has had some health issues. And as time has gone on, these respiratory illnesses that she's had have just gotten worse, to the point now that she lives in London and she really, for the most part, can't leave her apartment. It's really a shame. Here she is, she's in one of the great cities of the world, and she can't get out to enjoy it because, for the most part, she's sick. But there is a silver lining. Because she has a lot of time at home, she can spend a lot of time on a computer. And she can devote entire days, weeks, months to her writing craft. So we're chatting back and forth on Facebook and getting caught up on our day-to-day activities. And she just casually mentions in passing that she has this transcript that's almost ready for KDP Direct Publishing. She's just about ready to turn it in. I said, whoa, what's this KDP? What are you talking about? Oh, it's a program on Amazon that if you write your own material, well, they'll take it and they'll distribute it. I said, well, how does it work again? Is there some sort of fee? No, there's no fee. They share the profits with you. I said, let me make sure I understand this. You're saying that if I turn in a document that I edit, I'm the editor, I'm the publisher, I'm the creator, I hand it to them, they share the profits with me, and in return, it instantly goes to computers and Kindles and smartphones all over the world? Whoa. That was a life-changing moment for me, honestly. If you could look back at my life and say, That was pretty much a life-changing moment. That definitely was for me. Now you're probably wondering, librarians, why is this guy talking about ebooks? Well, I am sympathetic to your cause. I am the son of a librarian, a retired school librarian, so I am very sympathetic to the library cause. There's an offshoot of Amazon called CreateSpace. And CreateSpace will take your digital work and turn it into an actual book. It's a long journey. If you decide to go the route of self-publishing, be prepared. It's a lot of work. It will take over your life. It will become a part-time job. You are, in essence, your own publicist, manager, editor, everything, one-stop shop. I would also strongly suggest, if you're going to do this and be serious about it, you're going to have to make social media your new best friend. Each and every one of my books, so far I've got The Velvet Sofa, The Wizard Murders, Call Me Disney, and Yesterday's River. Each and every one of those titles has its own dedicated Facebook page with updates, information, updates talking about and publicizing events much like this today. This was definitely mentioned on each and every one of those pages. I also have a Twitter feed that I'm always updating, not just with dumb jokes, but published information, deals, offers. You've got to stay on top of it 24/7. It's enormously rewarding. It's tiring as well. But let me tell you something. The first time that you log into Amazon and you see that someone in Italy has purchased your work, yes, very exciting. But I didn't really come here to focus on self-publishing here today at all. What I really wanted to talk about from a standpoint of being an author is addressing the big what-if question. What if? Now, I think that's something that storytellers don't ask themselves enough. Too often, if I'm reading a book or if I'm watching a movie, too often I'll find myself thinking, why? Why was this made? What was the spark behind this? Why was this book written? Why was this movie made? I'm just not connecting here. And I think a better way of going about it that I would like to see and I would like to challenge more authors out there is to ask themselves the question, what if? Start with that blank slate. What if? Now, I won't pretend the what if question is original. Certainly not. I'm not going to try and take credit for it. I did take a cue from someone who is, I think, without question, one of the great storytellers of our time, that's Steven Spielberg. Does anyone remember the movie Hook? Came out in 1991. Well, before the film was released, they were running ads for it on TV. And intercut with footage from the film, I noticed they did something that I've never seen before. In between the shots, flashed words on the screen. What if Peter Pan grew up? And I thought, what a fantastic question. What an interesting way to approach a story. What a great way to bring something new to the table, which they were trying to do. That stuck with me. Now, you could argue whether or not the film successfully answered all the what-ifs successfully or not. But that's not the point, because what stuck with me was that whole entire premise of what if. And I would argue that you can find traces of the big what if question. You can find it in the DNA of some of the prevailing and enduring stories of our time. I'll give you two quick examples here where I think you can see the traces of what if. First example. Sometime about 1973, a young USC filmmaker sat behind his desk and thought, what if, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. Now think of all the possibilities that just opened up with that simple question. He created an entire universe off that one question. Another example, actually I think it's a better example, here's another what if of a big story of our time. What if there was a private school that was set aside just for children who showed the ability to practice magic? We know what happened there. The author came up with about 1,000 different answers to that question. She did a fantastic job. And what I'd like to do here is, using some of my own work here, is to provide you with an example of how the what if question applies, or how I actually did apply it to some of the things that I've written. First off is this book. I don't know how well you can see it under the lights here, but the title of this book is called The Wizard Murders. Very spooky looking cover there. I was very lucky. I had a local graphic artist named Kate Kirsten, who I think just retired from Quick Trip. I think she just retired as a graphics artist, and I was lucky enough to know her when I decided it was time to publish these books. And I said, "Hey, Kate, would you be maybe interested in helping me out here and producing some eye-catchy covers?" Well, you'll see everything to this point she has designed for me, and that's the first one. But this book asks the question, what if a killer hid their clues in the stars? Now that's a strange question, isn't it? What kind of person would catch on to that? Who would have the presence of mind to step back from a crime scene and have the presence of mind to see that the clues, the real clues to what just happened here, lie not here, but maybe somewhere else? We try to investigate that a little bit and see, what is that all about? Now, where did the genesis of this idea come from? Because what if this had just happened by osmosis? At least for me, it doesn't. Back in the 1980s, I don't know how many will remember this, but does anyone remember the big Procter & Gamble scandal? Well, the rumor that got started, there was a rumor out there that was completely untrue, that the moon and stars logo that Procter & Gamble had been using for years, somehow word got loose, or the rumor got loose, that this was a symbol of Satan. The rumor wouldn't stop. It was either Satan or the Unification Church. See, the conspiracy theorists could never quite sort it out. It was either Satanism or the Unification Church, but whatever it was, it had to be evil. Well, the poor company wound up spending millions of dollars trying to defend themselves from this baseless claim, trying to educate people. No, that's not what it means. It has historical significance. You don't understand. But the damage had been done. And unfortunately, Procter & Gamble had to eventually relent and pull the logo off of all of their products. Now, when this happened, I was a teenager, and I already had, at the time, a very fertile imagination. And I thought, let's just say it's true. Just for the sake of argument, let's say it's true. A multi-billion-dollar international company is going to put everything on the line and basically put "We Love Satan" on toothpaste, coffee, dishwashing detergent all over the world. Let's say it's true. Now, what kind of person would do that? Well, obviously, the only thing that I could really come up with is, obviously, a lunatic. Nobody in their right mind would do such a thing. Now, I want to make clear, the book does not suggest in any way that that was actually what happened. It does make mention of that actual event that happened, I think it was roughly 1981, I think is when that all would have occurred with the Procter & Gamble. But it did give me a leaping place when I started to think of the somewhat dark direction of someone who would have that sort of agenda, where they would be coming from. That's where I was able to jump off and create this work about a serial killer who keeps leaving very strange and unusual clues in his crime scenes. And like I said, it's a study of what sort of detective does it take to realize what he's truly dealing with, and how long would it take. The what if question has always been very useful to me. Another time that I attempted to use it and successful, I believe, applied to this book, Call Me Isme. Again, it's another Kate Kirsten designed, wonderful bit of artwork that she came up with there. It matches the shirt. Call Me Isme. This book asks a very peculiar question. And bear with me, there's a point to this. It up front asks the question, not in so many words, what if the Titanic was doomed to destruction by the presence of vampires? Now, it started as a joke. April Fool's Day, 2012. The Titanic was everywhere. It was almost the 100th anniversary of the sinking. You couldn't turn on your computer or the TV without hearing something about the Titanic anniversary. It was everywhere. At the same time, for books and TV, what was dominant? Twilight. True Blood. Vampires all day, all the time. So as a joke, I went on Facebook that morning on April 1st, 2012, and said, folks, that's it. I'm going for the commercial gold. I'm going to put vampires on the Titanic. Now, if there's one life lesson that I've learned without question in my time here on this planet, it's this. If an idea rings as loud and as long in your head as this one did for me, there's probably a darn good reason why. I couldn't sleep. It drove me nuts. I realized I had some serious questions to ask myself. Wait a minute, what if? The spark was going off in the back of my brain there. So I thought, okay, I've got to answer some very serious questions here. What if? How did they get there? How did vampires get on the Titanic? What did they do? Why? Was it going to be serious? Was it going to be campy? Well, I decided right away I'm going to be absolutely dead serious. I want this to read like a historical document of what happened. So I made that choice pretty firmly on. Now, in the course of actually committing to this book, which turned out to be an enormous commitment, there were two very strange little things that happened to me during the course of the writing, and I haven't really talked about them much publicly, but I'll share them with you here today, because I know how they sound. But they are interesting. Backing up a little bit here, the book is dedicated to my father. My father, Dr. Stephen J. McDevitt. The intro reads, for my father, Dr. Stephen J. McDevitt, who first introduced me to the Titanic. When I started to do some deep research in the book, I had always wanted to write something about the Titanic, but I couldn't crack the code. I couldn't think of anything new to bring to the table until this idea presented itself, and I thought, okay, if we do this, what's the approach going to be? Now, I've always been interested and fascinated in the story of Bruce Ismay. Bruce Ismay was the head of the White Star Line. Now, Bruce Ismay, who you may be a little familiar with if you're familiar with the Titanic story at all, he probably is the single most mysterious person on that ship. Because if you go back and if you read his testimony that he gave at the American and British inquiries after the disaster, some of his answers are just baffling. I don't know. I don't recall. That's all I can tell you. I've had some people say, Sean, he was probably suffering from shock, but I don't think so. If you go back and read the testimony in its entirety, and I have, a lot of it just seems conveniently evasive. So I was always rather intrigued by Bruce's seeming evasiveness at these inquiries, and I thought, well, how can we fill in some of the gaps here? And I decided that I've got to do some deep research on Bruce Ismay if I'm in fact going to write this book. So I did. And one of the first things that I learned about Bruce Ismay is that his birthday was on December 12th. As it just so happens, my father's birthday was on December 12th. Now, my father unfortunately passed away in 2010, much too young. But he was the one who first introduced me to the story of the Titanic. He told me about the Titanic long before it was cool. It was 1976. I was all of about 8 years old. He was reading this book. I noticed he was reading a book. On the cover was this painting of a ship, a giant ship that looked like it was about to make a plunge into the ocean. I'd never heard of this. And I said, well, Dad, what are you reading? What is that? Well, the book is called The Maiden Voyage by Jeffrey Marcus. I highly recommend it. I'm not entirely sure if it's in print at the moment, but you can probably find it at a library. Wonderful book. Maiden Voyage by Jeffrey Marcus. So I pressed him for info, and he told me a story I couldn't believe. To me, it sounded like something out of the Bible. You're telling me that the biggest ship in the world at that time, on its maiden voyage, a ship that was called practically unsinkable by its designers, strikes an iceberg, sinks, and takes enough people to populate a small town. This can't be. I kept asking him over and over, did this really happen? Now, for even the most casual Titanic buff, I'm sure they'll agree, once that ship casts its spell, it's over. It will never let you go. It's a story that won't go away. It is endlessly fascinating, and even today, we are still, 100 years later, learning about the disaster, what it meant, what caused it, what we have still yet to learn from the disaster. It's an extraordinary story. So when I came across this bit of trivia that Bruce Ismay, who I'd been interested in all along, that he had been born on December 12th, I thought, oh, okay. That's a nice little circle completing itself there. Fast forward about 6 months. It took me 6 months to get all of my characters on the boat at the same time. The book goes back and forth in time. The book opens about 6 months prior to the disaster. Then it takes you to some of Bruce Ismay's testimony after the disaster. Then it goes back to about 3 months before the disaster. Then it goes back to more testimony from Bruce Ismay, and it kind of weaves back and forth like this until we bring the timeline together, and everyone is on Southampton on the boat at the same time. It took me 6 months to get that far. Now, I realized that I had a big problem, or a big issue that needed to be addressed, was how do we tie vampires to the disaster? Well, the truth is they're tied into it in many forms. Not the least of which is what they decide to do. They have information that the ship is headed into dangerous waters. They know about the ice warnings. So, in the dark of night, at an appropriate time, they decide we're going to distract the crew, specifically the crew that's in the crow's nest. Now, I knew for months, this was the direction I was heading, that there was going to be a spell or something cast by the vampires at a crucial moment. And I didn't know what I was going to use. I thought about maybe paraphrasing something biblical. I honestly didn't know what I wanted to use for a chant. Well, interest of full disclosure here, I've always had, somewhat digressing here, but I've always had an interest in the Freemasons. They fascinate me. I'm not a traveler. My father was not a traveler. However, my great-grandfather on my father's side was. And through the years, I don't know how I wound up with it, I have a manual of Masonic Lodge rituals and rules and that sort of thing. Somehow this dog-eared leather book wound up in my hands. Well, tying things together here, in the book, the two vampires have gone rogue. They are Masons who are fully corrupt and doing terrible things in the name of Freemasonry, and it's completely unfair because they're obviously evil. They're not coming from a virtuous place. And it occurred to me, hey, I've got this manual here of rituals and rites. Maybe I can find something in here that will work for the spell for the vampires to cast at the appropriate moment. So I start flipping through, and I find something that starts talking about death time. I thought, oh, okay, this has promise. And I realized if I changed the order of some of the words, and if I changed the inflections, and also changed some of the definitions or interpretations of certain words, this could actually be interesting. So I get into it and I start writing it, and I'm thinking, wow, this is really interesting. What is this? And I go back a few pages to find out, what is this on? What exactly am I pulling from here? And as God is my witness, it says, funeral hymn traditionally sung to the tune of Nearer My God to Thee. My hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I almost ran out of the room. I could not believe my luck. Luck? I don't know. I started to wonder, am I dabbling into something that I shouldn't be dabbling into? But I took it as a great sign that I had to be on the right track with this idea, because I knew just the pitch of putting vampires in the Titanic by itself would be high concept, but you better deliver on some level. And I think that I did. It was a long and very arduous process, but I was pleased with the way that it turned out. And again, that question was from the beginning, what if? Finally, on the most recent book that I have is Yesterday's River. And the what if that was applied to this book was really on a personal level. I asked myself, what if I take this short story and this 2-act play and I put them together? Now the reason for this was I had, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of material that never saw the light of day. But as I got into publishing and got some forward motion going in the world of publishing, I realized there was a lot of material that I wanted to salvage somehow. And I had this one short story called This Time I Know, which I liked very much. It was a very emotional short little story that I liked very much, but it didn't seem to have enough dramatic weight to carry its own, legacy. At the same time, I also had separate, written about 10 years later, I had a play, a 2-act play called Nothing and Something, that I also liked very much, but again, wasn't sure about how it stood on its own because some of it was fairly esoteric. A lot of that story involves a writer, based very loosely upon myself, having a long-standing argument with his imaginary muse. But I took a look at these 2 books, and I sat down and I wrote the timeline. I said, is it possible to interweave these 2 things together, the short story and the play? So I worked hard on an outline, and much to my delight and surprise, whether I had intended it or not, whether I knew it or not, I discovered that the children who appear in the short story later became the adults who showed up in my play. Didn't realize that I had done that. It was a eureka moment like no other. I thought, oh, thank you. I can establish both of these in one shot. Excellent. It's a very emotional book. It's a very challenging book. I'm very open about that. But like I said, in this instance, the what if that I posed myself was more of a personal question, more of a practical question than really a creative question. But it just shows you that it can go in a number of ways if you're approaching the creation of a story. Now, right now, what I'm working on several things right now, and I have a book that has not been, well, I don't know what's going to happen to it yet. It will be released, it's just a matter of when. I haven't really talked about it much publicly, but it is called The Man with the September Face. And the gist of this book does have its roots in yet another what if. The what if in this instance is, what if there is a completely off-the-wall answer to who killed JFK? Where is that going to take me? I don't know. I haven't been able to answer the question yet. I'm working on it. But the point being, I decided to challenge myself with something big, a big, intertwined, difficult question. And we'll just have to see where it goes. And I would challenge other authors or anyone who's even thinking casually about it try that litmus test on your work before you start to put pen to paper. What if? Do you have your what ifs lined up properly in a row? Give it a shot, because it's worked reasonably well for me. I'm not going to tell you that my success on the internet has been massive. It hasn't. But I have had some success. Took a lot of work and a lot of drive, a lot of focus. And I strongly encourage, if you are serious about it, absolutely go for it. But be prepared. It will, in fact, take over your entire social life. At the moment, I think we are winding down here, but I would be open, certainly, if anyone has any questions at all about the process of self-publishing or anything as it relates to any of these books. I'm certainly open if anyone has any questions at all.
Did you get somebody to do editing?
Did I get somebody to do editing? Actually, I did do something. I did something that I took a cue from my friend in England, something that she does. Before she releases, she brings in a team of not just proof readers, but we also call them beta readers. And usually it consists, in her instance, it consists usually of about 4 or 5 closely trusted friends or colleagues to vet this on many levels, artistically, technically, creatively. Bring as many fresh eyes as you can. And I've learned that is a very, very valid thing. What's interesting is in the world of self-publishing is that you have immediate access to your work and you can correct things. Because I have admittedly found continuity mistakes or grammatical errors all of a sudden will leap out of nowhere at me. After looking at the same book for 5 years, something will leap out, oh no, how could I have missed that? Well, the good news is if you're in self-publishing, you can fix it in minutes. But yeah, what I did was I enlisted the help of quite a few people. I've been lucky enough to know people in a variety of backgrounds, from both a teaching perspective, a writing perspective, a theatrical perspective, to take a look at the work from a number of different ways and tell me what's ringing true. We're not talking about is it just technically clean, but is it working? Is it translating the way that I want it to? And that's something I would also very strongly recommend is don't rely on yourself to be the sole editor. I mean, obviously you have final cut. You have ultimate control over the work. But you are going to want to bring in as many fresh eyes as you can. And you do have to be kind of a bit of a nudge in pushing people along. Please read the transcript. I need to get this done. Sometimes you have to prod people. But it's very rewarding. And I've always made a point of thanking those people by name in the back of every book. I thank them profusely for their input to the book because it is invaluable. Chris.
Sean, have you ever started a book and it just took a completely different turn than you expected and ended completely differently?
That's an interesting question. That's sort of happening to me right now with The Man with the September Face. To give an idea of how long this has been going on, it was supposed to have been released March of last year. I realized, nope, not going to happen. Push it back to November. November started to approach. Nope, haven't resolved this yet. At this moment, I really don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen, but it's because it does keep evolving and changing, much unlike anything I've had before. Usually everything before I know what the journey is going to be. It's the beginning that's difficult for me because I've already envisioned in great detail where this is going, but it's the beginning that's usually difficult for me. But in this instance, I really don't know where this is going, and it's kind of exciting. It makes me wonder if I think I might be doing the right thing and challenging myself this time by not knowing exactly where it is I'm going. Okay. I do want to thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It's really been a pleasure, and believe me, You've made a mother in California very, very proud by having me speak to a library association conference. So I do thank you seriously from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.